Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Yo, 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 yo. What is up? Game over, Edmonton. We are live here on the SDPN YouTube channel. And hey, it's game 81 already. 81 games in the book as the Oilers knock off the Avalanche tonight 3-2 on the road in Denver. And we have a guest on tonight, a special guest, the godfather of hockey talk on the internet from ESPN, the NHL coverage. It is the one, the only Greg Wyshynski. Greg, welcome to the show. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. You also have to include in the bio that I am the man who picked the Edmonton Oilers to win the Stanley Cup this season. Bravely. Not alone. I mean, I think there was more than just one of us that did it in our preseason selections, but certainly, given my at times contentious relationship with the Oiler faithful, I have to say that I've backed them since the start of the season, and I remain firmly buttocks planted on the bandwagon at this stage of the season.
That is true. You did call them, and you mentioned a relationship with Oilers fandom for literally, I would say, 6-7 years. I'm one of the few people who knows that. You know what? No, I know you're not actually an Oilers hater. You've been a fan of game for quite some time. So it is funny just to see how on Twitter, how when you mention Edmonton, people are on you instantly. It's quite funny to see, Greg.
I know where it comes. I know where it comes from, though. Like, it's a combination of my American jingoism and Canadian antagonism. Like, that's clearly part of the shtick. It's been like that for 15 years. And then the other thing is, rightly or wrongly, Edmonton fans, not exactly a huge fan of my Hart Trophy criteria through the years for Connor McDavid in seasons in which he was statistically dominant, but outside of the playoffs, and using the definition of value in my prognostication of the awards has certainly not endeared me to many fans. But we're all on the same team now. Like, I want the best for the Oilers, A, to make me look good, and B, because I think it's good for hockey to have two generational talents on the same team drag their team to a cup. Like, it happens every so often, whether it's Mario and Jagr or whomever, like Crosby and Malkin. Like, it's going to happen for these guys, and I just have a feeling that the way things are set up this season, it's as good as a time as any for the Oilers to win.
No, of course. And tonight they go into Colorado. They beat the Avalanche 3-2, and we might be seeing again in a month or two these two, the last two teams in the Western Conference. But what are your thoughts on Edmonton going into Denver tonight and getting a hard-fought win, and winning without needing McDavid or Draisaitl? Because it's a game that came down to the efforts of guys like Evan Bouchard stepping up and other players. This wasn't a game in which you needed McDavid or Dry to go supernova, Greg, tonight.
They didn't, but I mean, it is, I still think, a McDavid win. I mean, it's his move in overtime that draws the penalty, that leads to the power play, that leads to the Bouchard goal. So it's like their presence was still very much felt, I think, in this victory, even though it wasn't necessarily, like you said, a dominant performance by them. I was interested to hear, I didn't realize this until I heard it on the ESPN broadcast, that was the 45th penalty that McDavid has drawn this season, which is first in the league. And I remember a scant few years ago, Connor was talking about the calls he didn't get. There was a whole big hullabaloo about, should McDavid get more calls? He still probably doesn't get enough of them. I mean, I think the margin between him and Michael Bunting, who's second in penalties drawn, is only like 2 or 3. But I did look back before we hopped on, and I guess he's been at or near the top of that category now for like the last 3 seasons. So I guess message sent, message heard by the NHL officiating community,
right?
To give Connor his flowers more often.
Yeah, because I recall in that weird shortened season against Winnipeg where Edmonton was swept, I think it was tracked by a friend of the show, Rachel Dorey. She tracked how McDavid wasn't, like, there was 41 missed calls in the series. And to me, that was absurd, because I'm a firm believer that superstars should get treated differently, because those are what people want to see on a sports net or on ESPN. People want to see those guys do their thing. We see calls, we see guys in basketball be able to give him the space. You see guys like LeBron be able to give him the space. You see in football, Pat Mahomes be given certain calls to perform well. In hockey, it's the one sport we consistently hold back our stars, which is kind of odd with the officiating, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge like benefit of the stardom guy when it comes to penalties. Like a penalty is a penalty, right?
Fair though.
I think where you're right though is that like, you know, I think where you're right and where McDavid is right is that like he's so good and he's so god tier in the way that he plays that if you actually did call it like Rachel tracked it, like if you actually did call it like that, I mean, he'd be probably leading this category by like 20, right? So I think in some ways he's always had a good point, which is that I'm so good and I'm so fast and they can't stop me that I should get more calls. But I do think that like in most cases, I'm not a huge fan of like giving the benefit of the doubt just because of the name on the back of the jersey.
No, fair enough, fair enough. And in tonight's game, Greg, just watching how it's funny how Edmonton and Colorado, these are two teams who have some of the top scorers in the league. And this game, of course, ends 3-2, a game in which the Avalanche were able to figure out the Oilers power play, which is going at a record level. What are your thoughts, Greg, on a team like Colorado being able to shut down Edmonton's power play? One that so many other teams all year long have had trouble shutting down in any form at all.
Yeah, it's a testament to their PK that they were able to do so well against it until, you know, the overtime goal. You know, Colorado's a tricky one to figure out. They've got a good collection of role players that are still there. Obviously, you know, they're struggling through the injuries that have plagued them all season, so they've not really gotten a good sense of what they're going to be. But like at full capacity, you know, they're clearly a contender in the West. They're clearly a team that could play for the cup again, but I'm still waiting to see exactly what they end up being. I mean, they never sufficiently addressed the loss of Nazem Kadri last offseason, I don't think. Their supporting cast a little bit different. Obviously, the goaltending is still very good, but it's a little bit different too. So, you know, the PK I think is a good example of how effective they can be still as a team in certain areas. I mean, Devon Taves doing his thing and, you know, Comfer and all those players, but I'm still waiting to see exactly like peak of their powers this season, what this Avalanche team ends up looking like.
No, I could not agree more. And as a team that is still looking at their peak, and again, McCarr didn't play. We noticed the team has missed. I know Atlantis called missed most of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a scary thing to know that this team, Colorado, they're still so good, and they're not even 100% yet. That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, like they are that good, and who knows about Landeskog, but like Lehkonen, Makar, you know, they're missing some pretty key players, and still went into full steamroller mode at the end of the season to really push towards the division lead. So you're right, man. It's still a scary team to face. I do think though that it remains to be seen if the mix changing for them, you know, when they need that great shift from a Nazem Kadri line and he's not there to give it to him, or a key goal in a dirty spot in the playoffs, like who does that now? And I'm still waiting to find out who that's going to be.
Right. It's a fair question. And going back to Edmonton for a sec, right? You know, one of the bigger aspects of this team that's kept them afloat has been the play of Stuart Skinner. And
Oh yeah.
coming into this year, of course, the tandem was supposed to be Jack Campbell 1, Skinner 2. And Skinner has taken advantage of Jack Campbell's struggles. He went to the All-Star game, Stuart Skinner, and I've just seen Skinner over the past month when he's 13-1-1. He keeps getting better. He's in serious conversation to be a Calder finalist. So what have been your thoughts on him stepping up in net? Because he's someone who I've written about before for the Hockey News as a future in Edmonton's net, and seeing him get better and better, like he's shown to me that he's going to be Edmonton's goalie of the future.
Yeah, it looks that way, right? At least this season by default, but I think
Mm.
he's got the goods to lay a claim to that gig going forward. Our show, The Drop, that me and Ardo Cal do on Thursdays, on ESPN Plus, we're gonna talk about like the top 3 for each award. So I was going through it today, and I don't know if there's a way he's not one of the 3 finalists for the Calder. Like logically, but also from a support standpoint. I mean, Beniers is probably going to win it.
Right.
He's just, you know, he's still leading in points. He's had the narrative all year of being like the guy who came in and helped transform the Kraken and turn them around from the doldrums of last season. So I think it's going to be very hard to pry Rookie of the Year honors away from Beniers. But then you get past him, and it's like Michelli with the Coyotes, I think, is second in scoring. You have some other rookies that are just kind of bubbling under the surface. Nobody really broke out offensively this year. I think the top three right now are probably Beniers, Skinner, who was sort of in that pack of other rookie goalies for a while this year, but then, Logan Thompson got hurt with the Golden Knights, and some other guys faded a little bit as the season went on. So I'd be surprised if he wasn't one of the three based on how important he's been to the Oilers, on top of his numbers being pretty good. And then the other one, I kind of think it might be Owen Power with the Sabres. Like, good numbers offensively. I mean, he's going to finish top 10 in rookie scoring, but like leads all rookies in time on ice, has been a real solid defender for them. Hasn't necessarily popped off in the same way that Makar did or Quinn Hughes did when they were challenging for the Calder, for example. But I think that his season's been solid enough, and the Sabres have gotten enough attention that he'll probably be the other one in that top three.
No, that's a fair. I like that. I talk a lot, Greg. And I mentioned up the top, Greg. You are the godfather. I mean that of hockey talk online. You're one of the first guys to really make online hockey talk a thing with Puck Soup and Yahoo Sports. And I feel like without what you guys did to push Yahoo, we wouldn't have zone time on Yahoo Sports. We wouldn't have so much aspect with so many things with the SDPN, other podcasts. So what are the men for yourself, Greg, to see? Of course, I know you're on ESPN now, but what are the men to see hockey podcasting and blogging grow to a place in which it's now being seen as much more mainstream than what it was 10, 12 years ago?
Well, I mean, first of all, it fills me with joy that there's still like unique voices at Yahoo doing hockey talk. Like, I know it's not necessarily on a blog called Puck Daddy anymore, but it's always cool to check out what you guys are doing over there, because it's different, and that's that was always the modus operandi of what we did, was just to be different and to have a unique voice, and I think that spirit's kind of been carried on over there. When I did the show at Jeff Merrick, like, we constantly were in awe and constantly honored by people saying that they were inspired by the podcast that we did to try to do their own thing and create podcasts and create content and find their voice. And I think a lot of those still exist today that were sort of inspired during the time of us doing that show. And that was like the biggest thrill ever. Just like it was the biggest thrill ever when I did Puck Daddy, and like I was able to lend a little bit of spotlight to a Tumblr or a Sports Nation blog or others that are doing great work that maybe don't necessarily get the same sort of opportunity I got to have a platform, right? So sharing the wealth and then seeing people create their own things, and also kind of just seeing, in the last dozen years, the huge diverse number of voices now that are talking about hockey, which is certainly a change from when it was like me and Myrtle talking, like in like 2008. Like, to see how life has changed, that end has been incredible, because that's the only way the game's going to grow, is if the conversation sounds different no matter where you go around the blogosphere and the internet. But I will say this about the blogosphere, though, man, like, it is kind of a super bummer to see all those SB Nation blogs go by the wayside. Like that's the moment where I looked at it recently. I'm just like, oh man, like, we had it so good for a long time of, having all these amazing fan driven sites, these little communities where you can check in and see what the real conversation is that's happening. And to see that whole community kind of like go by the wayside was such a huge bummer lately.
No, of course. But one good thing that we did is that these sites decided to go independent, and they didn't just die. I like that, because in years past, you might have just seen all these sites die, and that's the end of it. But I've seen all 32 sites say, you know what? No, we're going to go independent, and we're going to reboot because we've worked too hard to lose all this work, which is a great thing.
Yeah, and it was cool to see like Japers Rink and a bunch of other ones that I follow like go that route and try to keep it going. I guess for me, it's more like I'm happy those sites exist, but I'm bummed that the investment in specifically hockey digital media in that case was sort of like pushed by the wayside by a big company. And it's never a good sign. It's never a good sign, especially for a sport that seems like it should be at this point picking up a lot of momentum in the States. You'd figure there'd be more investment in those kinds of sites than less.
run. I totally agree with that. And going back to hockey media and hockey in America, of course, now you're with ESPN, Greg, and the NHL is back on ESPN. Being 3 years old, I grew up with that. I grew up with watching games on ESPN, on ABC. I remember how that was years ago. So it's great to have the NHL back there now. But I gotta ask you, Greg, have you and Arda and PK, like, what are you guys gonna do to try and get Stephen A. Smith to watch more hockey? Is it possible is it possible to get Stephen A. to invest some way? Maybe there's a way. Bring him to Edmonton, have him on the panel for LA Edmonton, show him what hockey's like in person, like show him what a series is like in the playoffs. Like, is there a way to get Stephen A. invest in hockey more somehow, Greg?
I think step one would probably be a good long Rangers run, maybe to play for the cup. I think, him being such a big New York media guy, that maybe we get a little bit of juice from that. But the cool thing about Stephen A is that, he's got this incredible ability to fire it up for any topic. I remember, I guess it was right after we got the rights, he did a whole thing of like a 5 subject countdown of things that he liked in hockey or something like that. And honestly, I'd love to see that every few months from him, just like, even if it's not coming from a point of where, he's reading my stuff, or he's like looking into the analytics on how the Oilers power play works, or anything like that. Like just give me a rant, give me an occasional rant from him. But that's the cool thing about it being back at ESPN, is like, it's not just him that could amplify it, but I mean, having Scott Van Pelt talk about it as passionately as he does, and having it being brought up on these other shows, and having it featured on Sports Center, and not only that, but also like the investment that they've made in the things that I create, the things that Kristen Shilton creates and Ryan Clark creates, and the having a show with Arda, the stuff that we do on ESPN Plus, like the point every week, like it's the thing I always hoped would happen with a rights holder in the US, which is that it's not simply just like, we have the games and we're going to put the games on and we'll talk about the games when they're on, and the rest of the time is going to be a classic car auction like it was on the other network that previously had the rights here in the US. But for us, it's like the games are on, we talk about the games, but then there's all this other stuff in the ecosystem that happens every day and every week, and that's the coolest thing about it, is just like the overall investment in the sport that they've had.
No, of course, it's great to see. And even when I'm watching games, what I love is, I'm watching when you are to do the drop, and then I see game broadcasts. I love just seeing the banter, Greg, from what happens when you see PK and Messier and Chelios, because it's so funny, because there's this generation gap from Chelios and Messier to PK. And it's like watching a nephew with his 2 uncles. And it's so funny, but it works somehow. But it works.
his two uncles that are like, they won the high school football championship in that town like 30 years ago, and then like he didn't. Right, so like it was that part of it was really funny. I thought over the weekend is like them goosing him about not having the cup and not knowing how to lift it and things like that. So but having PK a part of this thing has been awesome, man. Like, he's come on the drop a few times. Getting a chance to work with him a little bit has been cool. I always thought that like him having the opportunity to become a pundit was always going to be a really cool thing. And then, he's got his own show now. He's got this PK Places thing that'll be rolling in May. So it's on top of being able to be on the air and be an analyst and criticize people's fashions, he's also got this whole other thing going on ESPN Plus. So it's been really cool to have him be part of the team.
No, it's been amazing, Greg, and bringing back to just to the cup and the standings here with the playoffs and the year here. So I got to ask you, among the teams that could play New Orleans in the playoffs, who would you want them to see playing round one? Between so far, they could play. It appears like they could play either Seattle, LA, and I think there's an outside chance of playing another team. But who do you think they're matchup for them? Is it LA or the Seattle? Do you think? Because I think we're going to go head to head with LA most likely for the Oilers.
I mean, I would prefer them to play Seattle, only because I think LA is real good and real loaded and deeper and can hurt you in a number of different ways. Like I got nothing but respect for what the Kraken did this year. I think offensively in the last month, they've been really good. I think overall, like, I'd rather face their goaltending if I'm Edmonton than LA's. The LA part of it's really interesting because I mean, obviously they've got history with him from the playoffs last year, but this is a kind of a little bit more of a different Kings team. You know, Fiala, if he's healthy, adds a lot of dimension. The pickups that they had at the trade deadline add some dimension. They're really dangerous. I think if you're Edmonton, you'd probably rather see the winner of a Vegas LA series in round 2, and then get your chance to play a wild card team in round 1.
That's right. Oh, I mentioned here, our other co-host Zach Wild in our chat here mentioned also too. Winnipeg is more in place. So Winnipeg, I forgot the Jets could be a team as well. So what are your thoughts on Winnipeg? Because over their past month and a half, you know, they've kind of been free falling. They stabilized. Nick Ehlers isn't playing as much. Rick Bowness is always angry. Like that's an odd team. I don't know what they're gonna do come round 1 because they're an enigma wrapped in an anomaly. Like I don't know what would make Winnipeg right now, Greg. I really don't.
Yeah, you can't trust them. Like you might see a different team from games 1 to 2 in a series with them. I mean, the thing that gives you pause, obviously, is they have one of the best goalies on the planet on their team, and you know the idea that Connor Hellebuck could take over a series. There's always the possibility of it. They've got some supremely talented players. It's just like the idea that the team that lost to Calgary on home ice in a must-win game at the time is going to be a serious threat to anybody that's above them in the standings in the playoffs is kind of hard to swallow. But that being said, I mean, they've got guys that can crank it up, and they certainly have a coach that appears to have an idea of how to motivate them correctly.
No, that Winnipeg, they're an interesting team, man. It's a good point made again by Zach. How the one thing with Hellebuck is, as much as Winnipeg can be a bit iffy, a hot goalie can end you no matter who you're playing against. We saw it in 2021, how the people preordained in that weird bubble season where people had it wrapped up. You have North Finals going to be Edmonton, Toronto. Nope, we didn't get that. Like everybody assumed before it began, we're going to get those two, and then Winnipeg sweeps the Oilers and was probably one of the more frustrating series I've watched covering the Edmonton Oilers in a very long time.
it's the great equalizer. I was talking to Kyle Okposo about the Bruins the other day when I was covering the Sabres Rangers game, and he said, "Look, man, like even a team like the Bruins that looks as stacked can be, a combination of the old school Bruins aesthetic of being able to beat you up, plus this like incredible 60 goal scoring skill that they have in guys like Pastrnak. Like even a team that good can easily fall to a team that finds its stride for 7 games and has a hot goalie stopping everything. It's what makes the Stanley Cup playoffs such a unique animal, and is one reason why we have the President's Trophy curse. It's one reason why we haven't had a President's Trophy winner even make the final during the wild card era. So you're right. I mean, like, and especially when you think about a goalie like Hellebuck, I mean, he's exactly the kind of guy that could shock somebody in a 7-game series.
No, it's true. You mentioned right there the Boston Bruins. I gotta put you on the spot, Greg. Do the Boston Bruins make it to at least the Cup final? Because 133 points now, over 60 wins, set the record. Like, if I'm the Bruins, if I'm that front office, it's a failure if we don't make it to at least the Cup final in the organization.
They'll be the first ones to say that. I mean, like even tonight as they set that points record, like Brad Marchand, who a few weeks ago told me that they didn't care about any of these records, then all of a sudden they got bored and they basically started caring about them. Like even he said tonight, look, it ain't about these regular season records that we're setting. It's about winning the Cup, and like anything short of that is going to be a disappointment. And I don't think anybody is putting on airs about that. Like Bergeron came back to win a Cup. Krejci came back to win a Cup. The window is open for them to do so, and they have the most loaded roster in the league and are the most successful regular season team we've ever seen. So like, yeah, I mean, anything short of that is a huge disappointment for them. But I'm taking the field, man. Like if is Boston coming out of the East, or is someone going to find a way to knock them off? Like if Tampa gets past Toronto, that means Tampa's still Tampa. If Toronto gets past Tampa, you could easily see a situation in which there's that transformative belief thing that we saw a few years ago when the Capitals got past the Penguins for the first time in a long time, right? Like you get that level of belief in yourself when you finally get the monkey off your back. And like for the Leafs, they've not been out of the first round since the George W. Bush administration. Like it's been a while, right? So like if they can get past their tormentors, you could feel the wind in their sails. You could feel that momentum building, and it could easily be the Leafs that end up taking out the Bruins in that second round series.
Oh my! I just for the chaos of hockey Twitter, that would be very funny. First of all, one, get Toronto Boston again, because I just know come game one Toronto Boston, Steve Dangle will be frothing at the mouth once game one starts, just knowing how those series give him flashbacks. But no, if Toronto were to beat Boston, that'd be a series with Toronto could be for real. And if we were to somehow get, I just want you to know, Greg, if we end up getting a Toronto Edmonton Cup final, Canada is going to shut down entirely. Like just the disdain from east to west. If we get the two markets that are the most vocal in this country in a cup final, it'll be hilarious, Greg.
Yeah, and so from our perspective down here, in the States, like that final would be incredible, like for a number of reasons. One, obviously, is the Matthews and McDavid of it all. But I've long said that I think the Leafs, despite the sort of like hesitation a casual American sports fan has towards a Canadian hockey team playing for the Cup, like the Leafs are basically the Cubs, right? Like they're a very easy story to tell to an American fan. Like here are the biggest losers that we have, the team that has not won for a very long time. Like they suck, and now look at them. They've got a chance to finally take the cup home. Oh, and by the way, they have to overcome, the Lionel Messi of hockey, basically. Like they have to overcome our the greatest of the greats, and so like, that's a really sellable thing for an American hockey fan or casual sports fan, even if it doesn't have Boston or Pittsburgh or Philly or Chicago or any of these like established teams that the casuals usually turn out for.
No, you're totally right. And you mentioned just the marketability, like you mentioned right there, McDavid's Leo Messi of hockey, and just seeing some of the numbers that have come in from American TV ratings, like Connor McDavid. I know it's tough at times to market Edmonton, Alberta on ESPN. I know it's not easy sell, but McDavid is able to transcend that to an American audience. I've seen the TV numbers come in. It's like, wow, people don't care. Like they just want to see the best player in the league. He could be in Edmonton, he could be in Winnipeg, he could be in Buffalo. Like people are going to watch him, and put aside the fact that he's playing for the Oilers.
Yeah, I mean he's gotten to that point where he's must see, and that's really tough. Like Ovi, for all the greatness that he is, would draw in some fans, but not on the level of like, I've got to see what this guy does next. And we've not had that. Maybe I was trying to think the last guy that was like that. It might have been Bure. Like Bure might have been the last guy where you're making time to just see what this guy does, like the wizardry he brings to the game. And you're right. Like the numbers, I think the ESPN Plus numbers, I don't know for sure, but I've heard kind of anecdotally that there's definitely a lot more people checking out Oilers games. And the other team that has a very high level of interest from people seeking out the games on a nightly basis are the Devils. Probably because of the way they play, and also I think there's just a huge cult of personality around Jack Hughes. So it's interesting to see, like, these are two teams, Edmonton and New Jersey, that aren't always at the top of the list of like NHL draws, but because of the excitement with which they play and the obvious stardom that they have on the roster, I think there's a lot more interest in them now.
No, of course there is a lot more interest, and McDavid got 151 points, and this is easily the toughest era in hockey in terms of coaching, defending.
Oh yeah,
and McDavid is at 151. Like, do you think we've seen peak McDavid yet? Like, do you think he could go beyond this still? Because I don't know. Like, I don't want to put a ceiling on him, even though he's at 151. I don't want to cap where he can go to, Greg.
I don't think we've seen peak McDavid, only because I don't think that we've seen peak NHL offensive explosion yet. Like we are still building year over year on a goals per team per game basis in a way that doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I have to check the numbers recently, but the last time I checked, we were on pace to be the highest scoring regular season, I think, since 92-93. So I mean, a rising tide carries all ships, right? Like it's if McDavid continues to be McDavid and this league continues to trend in a direction of more and more and more scoring, especially on the power play, where obviously the Oilers are quite good, then it logically would dictate that he's going to continue to build on these point totals until they get absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, they aren't already. Like they already crazy. But Greg, we're gonna wrap things up here on Game Over Edmonton. I want to thank you for coming on the show. We gotta do it again sometime. And hey, if you're gonna meet Edmonton for the playoffs at all, let me know because we would love to have you back here in the city. You know, maybe sign a peace bond with Oilers fans. You know, have an understanding with the market. You know, you're not a bad guy.
I haven't been to Edmonton in a minute. Like we've had we've had reporters covering stuff in Edmonton. I haven't been there. It's possible I haven't been there since McDavid's first game. Like that's how long it's been since I've been to Edmonton. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a fun city. We had a good meetup there last time I was there. So I'm all about it. Plus if I'm there, it means that, you know, they're probably playing for a cup. So I'm all for it.
That is true. That is very true. Anyways, gang, to wrap things up, Game Over Edmonton. Thank you all once again for tuning into the show. I had a blast. If you like the content, like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your frenemies to subscribe to the SDPN YouTube channel and all of our Game On shows. For Greg Wyshynski, I'm Avry. We're gone. Peace until next time.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.